Matich, ESPN college football insider expert, longtime friend of the program, all-around good man, is back to discuss a game week. Trevor, college football is back. How you feeling?
Yeah, awesome. I mean, this was the most momentous, tumultuous, exciting offseason I've ever seen in my entire life. And now we get to see how it's going to play out on the field. I can't wait for kickoff in week 1. Week 0 was great, but week 1, incredible.
I never thought I'd be interested in watching UConn play football, but they played Utah State. So I watched that game. Utah State ends up winning that. But let's talk about BYU and South Florida. One of the Vegas lines says 11.5 points, a line for BYU to win by. Does that say more about the Cougars or the Bulls? What do you think?
I think there's a lot of respect for the Cougars, but I think that the Bulls are underrated. Last year, they really struggled in a lot of ways, but this is a team that is the second most experienced team coming back in all of college football, second only, by the way, to BYU's experience coming back. But they have upgraded in a lot of places. And if BYU is not careful, if they're looking ahead to Baylor, they might find themselves hitting the mouth in the South Florida sun. So they've got to be real careful of this Bulls team because they are very good.
Trevor Matich of ESPN with us on BYU Sports Nation. Okay, we brought up the line. You think USF is underrated. So what are you expecting to see from BYU specifically going to Florida, where they've had some struggles, but we think this is a way better and improved BYU team? What do you expect to see from BYU with a tough opening road test in the heat and humidity of Tampa?
I expect to see the offensive line perform like we think they will. This offensive line is as deep and talented as I've ever seen there, and they have a chance to be one of the greatest O-lines ever to play at BYU as a group. But this will be a test. People are thinking, fans are looking ahead to Baylor. But last year, the USF defensive front was a bit of a liability. So they brought in 5 transfers from the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC. All of a sudden now there's talent and there's depth there. So I expect the offensive line to step up and show us that they are who we think they are. And I expect the defense to generate more of a pass rush. That's one of the keys for their entire season. Get more pass rush from the D linemen and then get more pressures on the quarterbacks from blitzes. So those 2 things I think are going to be the keys to start to look for.
This is such a weird game for so many reasons, and let's talk about it and get your opinion on this. Obviously, South Florida stunk last year, 2-10. This is a team that played BYU last year in Provo. 8-point game. It was kind of weird. BYU jumps out 21-0. South Florida comes back. BYU ices it away, but everyone doesn't know. Oh, with like 2:20 left, they have no timeouts. Oh, it's over. We didn't realize it. It's not the same quarterback. It's Gary Bohannon from Baylor. Like, coming into this matchup, Trevor, BYU feels like they have the urgency and being on guard. It could certainly be a trap game with Baylor next week at home, but because BYU lost there in 2019 as well, and Jaren Hall got knocked out of that, it feels like the Bulls totally have BYU's attention. What are your thoughts on everything around and in this matchup?
Well, around and in this matchup, I mean, the Bulls think they should have won last year in Provo. And the Bulls know that they're better now than they were last year. You talked about quarterback Bohannon, who transferred in from Baylor. He's a serious dual-threat quarterback, and he can make plays. Last year's Bulls quarterback was a freshman, and he grew into the role as the season went on, but he wasn't the threat that Bohannon will be to BYU. They've got, as people remember from last year, as BYU fans will, they've got a 230-pound running back. And when he gets rolling downhill, he's a load to tackle. They've got speed at wide receiver. The linebackers for South Florida as a group are one of the better groups of linebackers in the AAC. You know, Houston, Cincinnati, really South Florida is kind of in that conversation for one of the best groups. And so this is a game that I think South Florida is going to come out on fire. And it's like BYU is going to try to come out and jump on them early. If they do, I think it'll be a tremendous accomplishment because South Florida is going to give BYU everything they've got right out of the gate. And what they've got is a lot more than most BYU fans understand right now.
Yeah, Jaren Mangum is that running back, 6'2", 231, 15 rushing touchdowns, Spence, last year.
They've got some guys that can absolutely play, as has been well documented by Trevor here and us leading up to this game. Trevor, we've been discussing BYU individuals, the personnel there. We obviously love Jaren Hall. We think the offensive line is going to be really stout. And in sports, we often discuss X factors. Well, at BYU, we discuss Y factors. So who, in your opinion, is going to be the Y factor for BYU in this game in determining things and really making a huge impact that maybe is a little off the radar for BYU?
Well, he's not necessarily off the radar, but Christopher Brooks, the running back transfer from Cal, is going to be a big part of BYU's success this year. There's a lot of pressure on him. Lapini Katoa is back. They've got a stable of running backs, but to replace Tyler Algier, you're replacing a All-America caliber playmaker, not just in the running game, but in the passing game. And so they'll need to use a bit of a committee. But right now, Brooks is the guy that I think a lot of people are looking for to see what kind of a playmaker he can be, especially behind that offensive line. So I would look there first. The BYU running back position, not just Brooks, but that position. Can they hold up and make the plays they need to make in order to keep BYU even with the sticks and to keep the defense off the field?
And if they don't, you have one of the better quarterbacks BYU's had in a minute, right? Jaren Hall had a tremendous junior season. And with COVID, I think he has eligibility next year. I don't know if this is his second season, whatever. He's got 2 years of eligibility, probably his last year. Jaren Hall and these weapons for BYU on offense with that O-line, you'd think there's the run game. If it's not there, Jaren Hall played well in this game 3 years ago, and we believe that he's way more developed in 2022 after a full season, right? So what do you expect in game 1 out of QB1?
What I want to see from Jaren Hall is to not go out there and be a hero. Don't go out and try to validate what's being said about him nationally, that he is one of the sleeper, sneaky, great quarterbacks in college football this season potentially. Because if he does that, then he'll be outside of the system and he'll be forcing the ball places. There's enough talent in the skill positions at BYU that all he needs to do is distribute, take what's there. Understand that a 5-yard gain on first down with a short pass is his friend, because now it's 2nd and 5, right? And then if he gets to 3rd and 2, it's still a win. And so to understand that part of it, I know he understands it, but sometimes in the heat of the moment, quarterbacks that are accustomed to being playmakers, that are expected to be playmakers, in the heat of the moment will revert to trying to make every play a touchdown. And I think this BYU team is good enough that they don't need one guy to be a superstar to make up for deficiencies elsewhere. This offense needs to distribute the ball properly to the right place at the right time. And I want to see that out of Jaren Hall in this opener, because to beat Baylor, they will have to do that.
Trevor, everybody talks about wanting to get off to a fast start. Obviously, BYU wants to make a statement early in this game. Are you a buyer or a believer in that idea that the team that starts quickly will win the game most of the time, or have we evolved away from that and football is just so long that it gets too much credit? What do you think?
Well, if you jump out to a early lead, you've got an early lead. You've got points the other side needs to overcome, right? So I mean, that's the advantage of jumping out early. But overall, emotion won't carry you over the course of a game.
Yeah.
Emotion can jump you out to a big lead. But if your emotion then will fade, and it will, then from there, the team that executes best will win, and the team with the most talent will win. So you don't want to get so far behind that when the other team comes out with so much emotion that they just jump out on a big score and it takes you out of your game plan. And you don't want that to happen. But at the same time, I think BYU is mature enough to understand. They've got guys that have been around football and life a lot, and they're mature enough to understand the way this game goes. And if things aren't going right in the moment, the thing to do next is run the next play and win the next play. That's it, right? Have that kind of perspective. So emotion's important, but execution will trump it every time.
You played on perhaps several of the greatest offensive lines in BYU history. You said this team might have one that's up there or could be the greatest. Other than looking at rushing stats and, first downs and points, obviously, what are you going to be watching with this O-line that will indicate whether they are dominating and being that kind of group that they can be or not?
Tackles for loss. They have to keep the opponent from getting behind the line to either make tackles for loss on the running game or make the running backs cut around a defender that gets penetration, either because he comes clean or because he pushes an lineman back into the backfield. That's the first thing. The second thing is, does the quarterback have time to go through his progressions and then step into the throw properly? A pass rush doesn't have to sack the quarterback. If the pass rush can constrict the pocket make the quarterback move off his spot a little, and then make it so he can't really step into the throw the way he wants to. It messes with the timing and the accuracy. And so those are the two things I want to see. Is South Florida getting behind the line and disrupting the running backs before they can get to the line? And is South Florida constricting the pocket such that Jaren Hall needs to move too much and he can't stride into his throws enough? If BYU's O-line avoids those two things, then regardless of stats, you'll know that they're doing a good job.
Trevor, we obviously have discussed a ton of known entities for BYU, and we feel like we have a pretty good idea of who they are and what they are going to be. And I've asked you this before, but because it's game week and maybe your opinion has changed on the matter, what is your remaining biggest question about this BYU football team? For the most part, brings back the entirety of its core from last year's 10-win team.
Yeah, and it's what we've talked about over the course of this offseason, Spencer. It is the pass rush, and the pass rush from the defensive line. And last year, I think they were unfairly maligned for not getting to the quarterback enough because they had so many injuries. I mean, they had epic injuries on the D-line. And by the time they faced Baylor last year, they were pretty much out of people. But that actually is good for this season because a lot of those backups that weren't expected to play as much as they had to late last year got a lot of experience, and they understand what it takes, not just to play, but to prepare. And that creates more depth on the defensive line, and it creates a bit more skill. And that skill is important, too, with preparation in practice and camp, because they're going in practice against one of the best offensive lines they will face. And that's critical because Baylor and Notre Dame and Arkansas and Oregon and these are some of the most physical offensive lines in all of college football. And I think USF will be improved on the O-line, but they won't be that caliber. But this D-line in practice had to go against that caliber of offensive line, and to succeed, their skill had to improve. They couldn't just overpower those guys. I know when I was playing, our nose guard, Brad Smith, was the best nose guard I faced all year in practice. Right. And so that made most games feel like they were pretty easy. And the defensive line has had the concept that we talk about in football all the time, that iron sharpens iron. And so I think they're in position, if they stay healthy, to show us a different level of disruption than they were able to show us last season. But it really is the key to the season for BYU. Can the defensive line get behind the line to disrupt the running game and affect the quarterback without having to blitz? Because then, with the corners that they have, if BYU does blitz and brings a fantastic group of linebackers to pressure, then a lot of good things can happen. But it has to start up front with the D-line.
81st in opponent yards per carry. Not good enough, right? Yet, BYU went 10-3. A lot of that is because they didn't turn the ball over, right? Do you expect BYU to take care of the ball in the same manner they did last year? Because last year feels like that's about as good as it gets.
Yeah, it really was. And when you look at some of their losses last year, the main feature was turnovers, right? I mean, bad turnovers, terrible time. Running back rips off a big run, gets just inside the 20 going in, fumbles the ball away, right? Big momentum. And next thing you know, the opponent has the ball. Things like that. And so that's one of the things that this coaching staff is able to coach very well with this group of people. We talk about BYU's maturity, the maturity of players, so many return missionaries, older guys, things like that. And it has a lot of that has to do with the small fundamentals. Turnovers, nobody wants to have a turnover, but small fundamentals of how you hold the ball, of how a receiver looks at the ball in, and what he does during that process. Those are small details that great athletes tend to overlook because they're great athletes, but those things lead to turnovers. I think BYU as a team as a whole that responds to coaching on those tiny details rather than overlooking them because they want to make the splash play.
Trevor, let's finish with this. Aside from BYU and USF, give me one other game that BYU fans should pay attention to in week one.
In week one, Ohio State and Notre Dame. And the reason for that is that Ohio State in the last several years has become the Big Ten's version of stereotypical Oklahoma, where they would have the first pick in the draft at quarterback, Heisman winner at quarterback, they'd make the playoff, and they'd score 45 points and give up 48, right? Because the defense wasn't good. The last couple of years, Ohio State's defense made the cardinal mistakes that any high school defense should never make. And that is they didn't stand in the right place and look at the right guy. and opponents would rip off massive plays, not because they beat a Buckeye athlete, but because the Buckeye athlete wasn't where he was supposed to be. And so they have a new defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles from Oklahoma State. And this Notre Dame offense has one of the best running games in all of college football as well. If Ohio State is not in the right place on defense, Notre Dame will gash them on the ground. And so everybody's saying that Ohio State, along with Georgia and Alabama, are the three teams most likely to win the national championship. For Ohio State, that will only happen if their defense takes a big leap forward. And this opener against Notre Dame, not only is it awesome to have Notre Dame playing at Ohio State, that's incredible, but it will tell us a lot about the national championship race as well.
Great stuff, Trevor. Always fun to talk with you. We're super stoked that the football is back and that, more importantly, Matich Mondays are back. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, guys.
Trevor Matich.